So we're now beginning the series on not worshiping idols. And we're going to have to understand what this has to do with you and I in 2022. What kind of idols are around? Maybe back in the day when people were real hardcore idol worshippers, but how does that exist today? And even if you say it does exist, but it's in such fringe places. And secondly, how is this a constant mitzvah? It's a constant awareness not to worship idols. What kind of idols are we talking about? So I'm going to go into an overview of the origins of idol worship. We're going to do a historical overview back to the beginning of time. And where do we find this account? We find this account in the Rambam. The Rambam in the beginning of Hilchos Avodah Zorah, in the beginning of the laws pertaining to idol worship, and there's a lot, by the way. One of the most common features when you open up the Torah, which is striking, is how many prohibitions there are against worshiping idols. You get this feeling that when you learn the Torah, that idol worship is a really bad thing. Really bad. Because it is. So we're going to have to understand what this is, what is exactly the prohibition, where it came from, because people who don't learn from history are bound and doomed to repeat it. Is that how they say it? And that sure is the truth. We have to learn, and that's why the Rambam gives us this historical accounting of how idol worship started. And notice that in Hebrew, we don't call it idol worship. We call it avodah zarah. Strange worship. Zarah, avodah means service, like really doing something, really being involved in something. At least by the idol worshippers, there's avodah. And nowadays, who does avodah? Everything's just this. The first time this ever happened to me, I was on a bus ride, one of these 60-person buses, coming back, and it was late at night, and so I was with my wife, and we were with a bunch of guys, and we were coming back from the north of Israel, and it was late, and we were schmoozing, her and I remember looking back, and all I saw was the cords hanging from the roof of the bus, looked like little placenta cords. And then I just saw 60 seats of just this little glow on people's faces. And it's oh my goodness, everyone's zombies. It was a very spooky feeling. So that's at least avodah zara. There's avodah. Nowadays there's very little avodah.
Just zara.
It's just zar. It's just very weird. There was avodah zara. It was avodah. You had to be into something to do avodah. But it's zar. Zar means it's very strange. What are you doing? Zarut. It's strange. It's foreign. So let's go back to the beginning. If anyone has a Rambam, very kedai, you need to know this Rambam. You need to know this Rambam very, very clear. So I'm going to read you from the beginning of Hilchos Avodah Zarah. Perek Rishon. Bibe Enosh, a grandson of Adam. Ta'u b'nei ha'adam ta'us gedola. A great mistake came to the world. And the advice of the wise people of the generation became foolish, something went off. Now notice, it wasn't the fools that started to get involved in idol worship, it was actually the chachamim. It was the intelligence. It was the intellectuals. It was the academics.
Intelligentsia.
And that's right.
What's his name? Enosh, you said?
Enosh. The Enosh atzma menatoim, and Enosh himself made mistakes. V'zeh haisa te'usim. So what was their mistake? The Rambam is going to elucidate it for us. Amru, they said, Hoyl v'hakel bora koechav melu v'galgalim. Since God, which they're recognizing God. Kel is also the name that we refer to God as the source of blessing, the source of chesed in the world. That since God made all of these stars, made these constellations, lahanhiges ha'olam, made these supernal energies in order to run the world. That's the system that God set up, is that yes, God is at the top, but He created this, He created all these energies in order to run the world. B'moed, and he put them all the way up in heaven. V'chalak lahem kavod, and God did give them honor and power. The constellations have energy, have power. Yes, the sun has power to it. And more than that, the angelic forces above the sun, the powers that bring rains, the energies of the world, the things that are higher up. Yes, these constellations, these stars have powers. Hey mishamshim, v'mishamshim lefonav, that they are servants of God. Ru'uyim hey. Isn't it fitting? L'shabcha, m'lefar, m'lechalik lem kavod. Listen to their. Isn't it fitting that if these are the agents, if these are the ministers that God Himself gave kavod, that God Himself, Yankee, gave energy and power to them, doesn't it make sense that we should honor them as well? You could compare this if a king has great ministers, high-ranking ministers. Isn't it an honor to the king, who of course the king gave the ministers all of their power, their ministerial authority? Isn't it an honor to the king when you honor one of the ministers? Sam, what do you say? Yes. Yes, right? The Queen's Jubilee, if you honor one of the members of the cabinet, one of the queens, isn't that an honor to the queen herself? Yes. Right? So they made an interesting point here. Let us show honor. We understand God, but let us show honor to the constellations and the stars and the angelic powers, the Galgalim, that are set up ministerially running this world for wealth, health, rain, sun, etc. Wheat, grains. Why don't we show the stars and the constellation that control the grain yields? Why don't we honor them? Why don't we show the sun constellations, the sun energy, and do a sun dance or a rain dance? Of course that it's coming from God, but wouldn't it be appropriate for us to maybe sing the songs of the sun, the songs of the grains, the songs of the rains, the songs of the buffalo? Right? V'zehu ratzon hakel baruch hu legadol ulechabed mi shegadol v'chabdei. That is that God would want such a thing. K'moishe hamelech, like we just said, roitze lechabed avodav v'ha'oimdim lefonav v'zehu k'foidoi shel melech. Somebody who honors the members of the king's council in front of the king, it's a great honor. So listen how this started to go. So far, so good. Any questions so far, my dear friends? You see where this is going, though? I'm foreshadowing. It's about to go south.
It's how everything starts. It's like you knit all right, and you try to do things, and then...
Even though there's an interesting time, they make an interesting point, right? They're saying, doesn't this make sense? Tomorrow we're going to bring from the Nefesh HaChaim. If anybody has a Nefesh HaChaim, bring your Nefesh HaChaim. It's for you, Yon. Bring your Nefesh HaChaim tomorrow. In Shar Gimel, we're about to get into some wild stuff tomorrow, okay? So just get ready for some Nefesh HaChaim tomorrow. For now, though, we just need more Rambam. Kivin sha'ala davar zeh al libam. Okay, look what happened. It went up on their hearts to do this. Hitchilu livnois lekoichav meichalois. Well, now that we understand the concept of giving honor to the ones whom the king gave honor to, well, what's to stop us from building shrines to these stars and to these constellations and to the gods of Saturn and Mercury and Pluto.
Which shrine?
Shrine is heichalos, sanctuaries, temples. Ulahakriv lahem korbanos, and let's give offerings. Let's give incense. Let's begin to appease the eagle spirits and the buffalo spirits and the lion, and we'll do dances, and we'll begin, even though we know, because we need buffaloes, because we eat buffalo. Not the Jews, you're not allowed to eat buffalo, it's not a kosher animal. But
if you shecht it properly, it is.
Buffalo?
Yeah, it's like a cattle. You just have to shecht it properly.
I don't think it's like a regular cattle.
No, it has the same stomach, cut, and the split hooves.
If in fact, so we'll have to show me the details afterwards. I want to see if it's a regular, like a shore. This that we worship. So in the beginning it was, of course we know that they all come from God, but it's like showing. Now, could you see that this is already going a little bit? So imagine now the king. You have the king, and the king has ministers. So you could understand how the king would appreciate if you show honor to the ministers. And you could appreciate how that's really an honor to the king, because the king is giving the ministers power. But what if people start really going to the ministers and offering, sacrifices to the ministers and giving, paying homage? A little, you could see where there's a certain feeling like, well, what about the one who gives the ministers their power? You're going a little bit too far. Now, by the way, this is going to be a big sugi. It's called the sugi of shittuf. Shittuf. Shittuf means, it's a big sugya. If shittuf is aser deraisa, definitely for Klal Yisrael it is. Shittuf is the idea is that, of course, people know that God is the source, but why can't they also honor or give worship to the stars, knowing where the stars get their blessing from, where the stars get their... Why can't somebody honor or worship an angel? Obviously, knowing that angel is getting all of its power from God. So for Klal Yisrael, that's Aser Mamish. And we're going to get to that in the next mitzvah, which is a Yichud Hashem of God's unity, more in detail. But we're beginning what's called shittuf here, is that there was a problem of appointing honor, even though there's an awareness that it's coming from God, the power of that minister.
If you're not worshiping, I'm going to...
Shin Yud Tes Tav Vav
You're not supposed to enter church, but even if you're not the one to be worshiping.
So we'll talk more about that. We'll talk more about that. About the dinim of where a person, the halachas of what is allowed, the halachas of what constitutes shittuf. We'll have to talk about that. Shittuf being God is God, but then do I worship the emissaries? So for Klal Yisrael, the message that we've always been telling the world is hardcore monotheism. Is we go right to God. No emissaries, right to God. Everything is right to God. All prayers direct to God.
Even though the other nations have their own sar, we are dealt with God
Ein Mazli Yisrael. That's right. Ein Mazli Yisrael. And yes, everyone has a sar, and that's how the energy comes in. The shefa comes down from Shemayim. But yes,
still, even if you're not Jewish, you direct prayer to Hashem or God.
All of humanity to pray to the one and only God. There's we all share the same God. It's very important. We don't have monopoly on anything. The mission of Klal Yisrael is Or LaGoyim, is to be the light to the nations, is to shine the light of Hashem Echad. God is one. Not one in the category of gods, but one and nothing else. We are in God. We're all inside of God. We are inside of God. That's hardcore monotheism. That's what we're all about. That's been our message from the beginning. That's the message that we're going to bring all of humanity. And that's the message that when Mashiach comes, all of humanity will know that truth. That's all we're going to be doing in the times of Mashiach, is just teaching Torah to the whole world. Because Torah links you into that truth more powerfully than anything else. Everything. It's all inside of God. And that God has a purpose and a plan for creation. That was the first mitzvah we talked about, the mitzvah of Emunah. That God creates, runs, intimately involved in my life, and has a purpose for creation. There's a purpose. Creation is going in a certain direction. Okay, so back to our story here. Now they started building temples and shrines. Lefaram, bidvarim, l'shtachavois. Now they're bowing down. I understand, you're being nice to one of the ministers, but you bow down to one of the ministers in front of the king? It's getting a bit too much. OD, like they say. Lamulan, kedei lahasig rotzna beire b'dai temara. Now it's interesting. They think that they're doing God's will. But daitem hara, they've already become wicked here. There's something that's off. Yeah.
What are they bowing down to? Just like the sanctuaries, the idols?
Yeah.
Maybe they already start making physical idols yet? Or no?
No, so not yet. Now comes the next part. V'zeh haya ikar avodah zarah. Look at that. This is the ikar avodah zarah. Is the concept of starting to bow down and to praise. Even though the very ministers that God gives power to, but they have now moved away, and we'll see tomorrow, Mirz Hashem, Bli Neder, in the Nefesh HaChaim, a little bit where this was coming from. A little deeper into it, more precise. Kach heim oimrim, oivdea hayoidim ikara. Loishem oimrim she'ein sham eloika ela koich av zeh. Not that they were saying, there's no God, all there is the Pluto energy, or Mars. And we're not talking about the planet, we're talking about the spiritual energy behind it. We're not talking about buffaloes, we're talking about the energy behind them. Not the sun and the rain. We're talking about the stars and the constellations, the energies. These are very real things. God gave energy to these are ministers the way that God made the world. A lot of this is all found in the Kabbalah books. The Rambam's just giving you the introduction of how the whole thing started. Hushir Yirmiyahu Omer, and the prophet Jeremiah says, Mi lo yira'acha melech hagoyim ki lecha yasa, ki bechol chachmei hagoyim bechol malchusam me'ein kamoicha. Who doesn't know you? Everybody knows you, Yirmiyahu is saying. They all know God, Shittuf. They all know you, God. Everybody knows you. All of the chachmei hagoyim, all of the wise people of the world. Now, wise, we're borrowing that language. The academics of the world, they all know you, except that they are now moving away from you. Uba'achas yivru v'yichsalu musar havalam eitzu. They don't actually think that all there is this piece of wood. Kloimer hakol yoidim shatahu akel levadcha. That you're the only God, aval te'usam v'kislusam shemidamin shezeh hevel ritzoinchahu. They think, though, that this was your will, is to start to worship the ones that you give honor to in the whole running of this world. Okay, that's halacha aleph. Tomorrow we're going to go into halacha beis and continue with this theme. Everyone have a wonderful day. Kol tuv sela. Have a wonderful day. Is that Yirmiyah?